Hollywood has made hundreds of war movies, but not all of them pass the toughest critics. The men and women who actually lived through the chaos. Veterans don't care about glossy effects or glamorous stars. They care about truth. Which films made them nod in recognition, or even shed a quiet tear in the dark? You might think you know the obvious picks, but wait until you see which titles veterans call their all-time greats. Saving Private Ryan 1998. The film that redefined modern war cinema didn't just entertain veterans, it shook them to their core. When Steven Spielberg opened with the storming of Normandy, veterans in theaters reportedly gasped, cried, and walked out to catch their breath. The Omaha Beach landing is often called the most realistic sequence ever put on film, not because of explosions, but because of the small details. The muffled sound of ears ringing, the camera jerking like a soldier's terrified gaze, the sudden randomness of who falls and who survives. Tom Hanks leads a squad sent on an almost impossible rescue mission. But what stuck with veterans wasn't the plot, it was the way the men carried themselves. They argued, laughed, and doubted, just like real squads do under pressure. Spielberg made sure no actor looked like a superhero. Instead, they were tired, dirty, scared, and painfully human. Veterans often say this movie captured the confusion of battle better than anything before or since. Some even credit it for sparking a new wave of respect for those who served. With over $480 million earned worldwide, it was also a blockbuster. But ask a veteran what they remember, and they won't talk about ticket sales. They'll tell you about the first 27 minutes that felt like stepping back into history. Band of Brothers 2001. Not technically a movie, but veterans insisted this HBO miniseries deserves a spot. Band of Brothers follows Easy Company of the 101st Airborne from training through Europe, giving the story room to breathe across 10 episodes. Veterans loved the long-form format because, unlike a 2-hour film, it showed the slow grind of war, the weeks of cold, the endless waiting, the bonds formed in foxholes. Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg produced it with obsessive attention to detail. Surviving members of Easy Company were consultants, and some even appeared in interviews that bookend episodes. That authenticity mattered. Veterans saw their own stories reflected in moments like the Bastogne episode, where men froze in the snow with barely any supplies. The series didn't glamorize their struggle, it showed it in painful, exhausting detail. Every soldier watching could point to scenes that felt pulled straight from memory. The camaraderie, the bickering, the way humor and despair mix when the world around you is falling apart. Veterans especially praised how the series handled replacements, new faces joining a unit where bonds had already been forged through fire. That tension was real. Band of Brothers went on to win Emmy Awards and critical acclaim, but veterans often rank it above big-budget films. Why? Because it took the time to capture what really mattered. Ordinary men, enduring the extraordinary, together. It remains the gold standard for authentic storytelling about World War II. Battleground 1949. If Saving Private Ryan was the modern benchmark, Battleground was the veteran favorite of its own time. Released just 4 years after the war ended, this MGM classic zeroed in on the Battle of the Bulge. 20 real veterans trained the actors, and some even appeared on screen. That connection gave the film an edge. When characters cracked jokes or cursed the cold, it didn't feel scripted, it felt lived. The movie follows one squad trapped in the frozen woods of Bastogne, low on food and high on stress, while German propaganda blares from loudspeakers. What veterans loved most was the psychological accuracy. These weren't fearless heroes charging into glory. They were regular men, cold, tired, and scared, trying to do their jobs. Van Johnson plays a soldier cracking eggs in his helmet, only to be called away before he can eat. The yolk drips into the snow, wasted. That tiny moment resonated more with veterans than any dramatic speech. James Whitmore, himself a Marine veteran, played the grizzled sergeant who holds the unit together through grit alone. Director William Wellman built snowy landscapes right on the MGM lot, but the dialogue and emotions carried the realism. Veterans consistently rank Battleground as more authentic than some modern films. precisely because it captured the blend of humor and despair that defines life on the front lines. It won 2 Oscars and became a hit, but for veterans, its true legacy is honesty. They were expendable 1,945. Released while war wounds were still raw, this John Ford drama pulled no punches. The story of PT boat crews left behind in the Philippines showed sacrifice without the usual Hollywood gloss. Even the title stung. Veterans knew exactly what it meant to feel expendable. John Wayne starred, but this wasn't his usual larger-than-life role. Ford, a Navy captain during the war, actually mocked Wayne during filming for dodging service, forcing him into a more subdued, vulnerable performance. Robert Montgomery, who had commanded real PT boats, even directed scenes when Ford was injured, adding a layer of authenticity impossible to fake. The film shows boats fighting hopeless odds against the Japanese fleet. There are no sweeping victories here, just men buying time with their lives so others could regroup. Critics praised the gritty realism, but audiences in 1945, weary of war stories, weren't ready. The movie flopped at the box office. Veterans, though, kept it alive for decades through late-night television screenings. They respected it because it didn't sugarcoat defeat. Instead, it honored the courage of men who fought, knowing survival wasn't guaranteed. For many who lived through those years, They Were Expendable wasn't just a movie title. It was a bitter truth written across their memories. The best years of our lives, 1946. Not every war story happens on the battlefield. This Oscar-winning classic tackled what came after, The Return Home. Released just 1 year after the war ended, it followed 3 servicemen struggling to fit back into civilian life. Veterans found it hauntingly accurate. The breakout role belonged to Harold Russell, a real veteran who lost both hands in a training accident. He played Homer Parrish, a young man learning to live with prosthetic hooks. Russell wasn't a trained actor, but his raw presence earned him 2 Oscars, a feat never repeated. His story struck veterans deeply, reminding them that not all wounds are visible or easily healed. The film also explored financial struggles, strained marriages, and the quiet battles of post-traumatic stress. Frederick March's character, a banker-turned-alcoholic, made veterans nod knowingly. Dana Andrews played a bombardier who ends up working behind a soda counter, a symbol of how quickly glory faded back home. Director William Wyler had flown real bombing missions over Europe, so he knew the weight these men carried. Veterans praised how the movie gave them dignity while showing their pain. Families expected their heroes back. Instead, they got men who had been changed forever. The best years of our lives didn't just sweep the Oscars, it became a mirror for an entire generation. For veterans, it remains one of the few films that understood the hardest part of war isn't always leaving. Sometimes, it's coming back. The Bridge on the River, Kwai 1957. At first glance, it looks like a story about British officers building a bridge in Thailand, but veterans quickly point out, it's really about the breaking point of pride and sanity. Alec Guinness plays Colonel Nicholson, a man so obsessed with military order that he ends up helping the enemy, only realizing too late the cost of his blind discipline. Director David Lean didn't take shortcuts. He spent months studying actual accounts of POWs and the brutal construction of the Burma Railway. William Holden's commando subplot keeps the tension boiling, but what veterans loved most was the moral complexity. There were no simple heroes, just men caught in an impossible situation where survival meant bending the rules, sometimes beyond recognition. The whistled Colonel Bogey March became an anthem soldiers recognized instantly. Engineers praised the sheer realism of the bridge's design and destruction. Veterans, especially those who had endured captivity, respected the film for showing that war wasn't always about courage, it was often about endurance, and sometimes, the line between dignity and madness blurred completely. The Bridge on the River Kwai swept the Oscars, winning Best Picture and 6 more. But beyond the awards, veterans saw themselves in the quiet, tormented faces of men holding on to protocol as the world around them crumbled. It remains a haunting reminder that sometimes, the greatest enemy is within. Das Boot, 1981. Few films have made veterans claustrophobic just by watching. Wolfgang Petersen's Das Boot is one of them. It takes viewers deep into the suffocating steel belly of a German submarine during the Battle of the Atlantic. Veterans who had served at sea couldn't believe how accurate it felt. The endless noise, the constant mechanical repairs, the way sweat and fear dripped from every surface. Jürgen Prochnow plays the captain, a professional sailor trapped in a war he doesn't believe in, trying desperately to keep his crew alive. Veterans noted how the film refused to glorify the mission. Instead, it showed the universal truth. Men under pressure are just men, regardless of their flag. The attention to detail was obsessive. The submarine sets were built so tightly that cameras barely fit, forcing the cast and crew into the same suffocating conditions as real sailors. Every dial, every valve, every frantic scramble during a dive rang true. Naval veterans especially praised the sequences showing emergency procedures and damage control. They looked painfully familiar. At nearly 3 hours long, the film didn't hurry, and that was the point. The drawn-out tension created a sense of real time, mirroring how endless patrols actually felt. Veterans say Das Boot captured the mental toll of underwater combat better than anything before or since. It earned Oscar nominations and global acclaim, but its real achievement was making audiences feel what veterans already knew. Life inside a submarine was survival at its most brutal. The longest day, 1962. When it came to capturing the scope of D-Day, veterans consistently pointed to the longest day. Unlike later films that zoom in on one squad, this epic cast a wide net, showing perspectives from American, British, French, and even German troops. Veterans praised the attention to tactics and logistics, from paratroopers landing in orchards to beach assaults under crushing fire. The film boasted an all-star cast: John Wayne, Robert Mitchum, Sean Connery, Henry Fonda. But what mattered to veterans wasn't the celebrity factor. It was the authenticity. Director Ken Anakin worked with real D-Day veterans as consultants, ensuring details rang true. What veterans loved most was the chaos. Plans fell apart immediately, radios failed, men landed in the wrong fields, and improvisation ruled the day. That rang familiar. Veterans who had been there said the film captured the unpredictability of the invasion more honestly than any before it. The 3-hour runtime allowed space to show how each part of the invasion connected, emphasizing the sheer complexity of the largest amphibious assault in history. Even German veterans respected the balanced portrayal of their side, noting the absence of caricature. The Longest Day won critical acclaim and several awards, but for veterans, it served as a kind of memorial. Watching it wasn't just entertainment, it was recognition of the madness, bravery, and chaos that defined one of history's most pivotal days. Go for Broke, 1951. This film wasn't just a war drama, it was a statement. Go for Broke told the story of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, composed of Japanese-American soldiers fighting in Europe while their families were forced into internment camps back home. Veterans praised it for its honesty, not shying away from the prejudice these soldiers faced even within their own army. Van Johnson played a reluctant lieutenant who had to learn to respect his men. But the real weight came from the cast itself. Many of the actors were actual veterans of the 442nd. That authenticity bled through in their performances, giving the film a documentary-like edge. The phrase, "go for broke," came from Hawaiian slang, meaning risk everything, and the real 442nd embodied it. They became the most decorated unit in American military history, earning more than 18,000 awards. Veterans across all backgrounds respected that level of courage. Director Robert Pirosh, who also wrote Battleground, knew how to capture soldier banter, humor, and grit. Veterans loved how the film showed not just the battles, but the burden of proving loyalty in the face of injustice. The movie became a box office success and helped shift Hollywood's approach to depicting minority soldiers. Veterans often recommend it as a reminder that courage comes in many forms, and sometimes, the hardest battles are fought not overseas, but within your own country. Hacksaw Ridge, 2016. Some heroes carried rifles. Others carried stretchers. Hacksaw Ridge tells the story of Desmond Doss, a medic who refused to carry arms but still saved 75 men during the Battle of Okinawa. Veterans loved it because it proved courage. didn't always mean fighting. It could mean risking your life to drag others to safety. Andrew Garfield's performance captured Doss's quiet strength, but what veterans noted most was the authenticity of battlefield medicine. The film showed the brutal reality of carrying wounded men down cliffs, treating injuries under fire, and improvising when supplies ran out. Veterans with medical experience said it was one of the most realistic portrayals of frontline aid they had ever seen. The production leaned on practical effects, making the combat sequences feel raw and unpolished, just like the real thing. Veterans respected how it showed the ridicule Doss endured from his own unit before earning their respect the hard way. Hacksaw Ridge won critical acclaim and multiple awards, but what mattered most was the recognition it gave to medics. Veterans often say this film finally put the spotlight on the men who saved lives instead of taking them. For those who served in medical roles, it was long overdue. Letters from Iwo Jima, 2006. Clint Eastwood did something few Hollywood directors dared. He told the story of Iwo Jima entirely from the Japanese perspective. Veterans praised it because it humanized the enemy, showing that soldiers on both sides dreamed of home, feared death, and endured impossible odds. Ken Watanabe starred as General Kuribayashi, a commander portrayed with dignity and compassion, trying to prepare his men for certain defeat. Veterans noted how the film avoided propaganda, instead focusing on individuals trapped in history's tide. Eastwood filmed in Japanese with subtitles, adding to the authenticity. Veterans appreciated the honesty. It didn't sanitize the harshness of battle but also didn't strip the soldiers of their humanity. Some veterans even said it helped them understand the men they once fought against, recognizing a shared soldier's experience that transcended nationality. The companion film, Flags of Our Fathers, focused on American troops raising the flag on Iwo Jima, but it was letters that stuck with veterans. They saw it as a rare Hollywood attempt at balance. Critics praised it, audiences respected it, and veterans recommended it as one of the most important war films of the 21st century. Letters from Iwo Jima wasn't about winning or losing. It was about understanding, and that, veterans say, is the kind of film that lasts. In Harm's Way 1965, not every war story is about charging the front lines. In Harm's Way showed the quieter, grimmer struggles of leadership in the Pacific. John Wayne and Kirk Douglas played Navy officers navigating personal failures, broken families, and impossible decisions while the world collapsed around them. Veterans connected with the honesty. Instead of clear-cut heroics, the film showed alcoholism, moral ambiguity, and the crushing responsibility of command. Otto Preminger even shot it in black and white to emphasize the gray morality of war. The story begins with Pearl Harbor and follows officers through the chaotic early days of defeat, when victory seemed far from guaranteed. Veterans appreciated how it depicted that confusion, protocols collapsing, resources stretched thin, leaders forced to choose between bad and worse. Naval veterans especially praised the shipboard atmosphere, the chain of command tensions, the quiet dread before major operations, the way decisions haunted leaders long after orders were given. All of it felt authentic. The film became a success at the box office, but veterans valued it for its unflinching portrayal of the human cost of leadership. For many who served, In Harm's Way was less about glory and more about survival of conscience in impossible times. Fury, 2014. Most war films follow infantry. Fury rolled into a tank. Brad Pitt leads a Sherman crew through the final months of the European campaign, and veterans of armored units were stunned by the detail. Real Sherman and Tiger tanks were used on set, making the combat sequences look and feel brutally authentic. What veterans praised most was the claustrophobia. Inside the tank, the crew lived, fought, and nearly broke down together. The film captured the sweat, noise, and grime of armored warfare better than anything before it. Veterans noted how even small details, loading shells, fixing mechanical failures, navigating mud, were handled with painstaking accuracy. Shia LaBeouf famously stayed unwashed during filming to mimic the conditions, and the entire cast went through a boot camp run by a veteran military advisor. That preparation showed. Veterans said the crew dynamics, bickering one moment, protecting each other the next, felt exactly like life inside a metal box on wheels. The climax, with the crew holding their ground against overwhelming odds, impressed veterans with its tactical realism. But more than that, it showed the psychological cost of being trapped together in such brutal conditions. Fury wasn't about glory, it was about grit. And for veterans who knew the inside of a tank, it felt uncomfortably real. The Big Red One, 1980. Director Samuel Fuller didn't need to imagine what infantry life was like, he lived it. As a veteran of the 1st Infantry Division, nicknamed the Big Red One, he used his own experiences to craft a film that veterans respected for its raw honesty. Lee Marvin stars as the grizzled sergeant guiding young soldiers through North Africa, Sicily, Normandy, and into Germany. Veterans praised the film's episodic style, capturing how war wasn't one long continuous story but a series of battles, marches, and brief respites. Mark Hamill plays one of the young recruits, representing the constant influx of replacements into veteran units. That dynamic, new faces arriving to fill empty boots, was something veterans remembered vividly. The film avoided Hollywood-style speeches. Instead, it focused on survival, adaptation, and the grim humor soldiers used to cope. Fuller even included the liberation of concentration camps, showing the moral shock soldiers experienced. Upon seeing the true scale of destruction, veterans admired the Big Red One for capturing the unglamorous truth. War wasn't about glory, it was about enduring the next day, and then the one after that. Fuller's lived experience gave the film an authority that no amount of studio polish could fake. Come and see 1985. No film disturbed veterans quite like this one. Soviet director Elim Klimov created Come and See as a gut-wrenching portrayal of the Eastern Front. Veterans said it was the closest cinema has ever come to showing what war does to civilians, especially children. The film follows a Belarusian boy who joins partisan fighters and gradually loses his innocence as he witnesses unspeakable horrors. Veterans praised its unflinching honesty. It didn't show battle as triumph, but as devastation. Villages burned, families destroyed, and a child's face aged decades in the span of hours. The surreal imagery, hallucinations, distorted sounds, dreamlike pacing, wasn't just style. Veterans said it mirrored the psychological trauma of witnessing atrocities. For those who fought on the Eastern Front, the film captured a truth that statistics and history books never could. Many veterans warned it was almost too much to watch, but also said it was necessary. It showed the part of war often left out in Western films, the civilians caught in the middle. Come and See earned international acclaim. But its real legacy lies in the way veterans still speak of it, as the most devastatingly honest war film ever made. Tora, 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 1970. Most war films pick one perspective. Tora, 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 doubled it. Half was directed in Hollywood, half in Japan, showing Pearl Harbor from both sides. Veterans admired this balance, calling it one of the fairest depictions of a pivotal day. The film avoided melodrama. Instead, it leaned on detail, the miscommunications, the planning, and the slow-motion disaster of signals ignored. Veterans respected that it didn't cast cartoon villains or flawless heroes. Everyone was human, everyone made mistakes, and those mistakes added up to catastrophe. The aerial sequences stunned audiences, but what veterans noted most were the small things. Officers frustrated by bureaucracy, pilots nervously checking their planes, families caught off guard as history shifted around them. For those who had lived through Pearl Harbor, it was chillingly accurate. Even Japanese veterans praised the film for honesty, a rare compliment in a genre often dominated by one-sided stories. The international production team worked together to ensure authenticity down to uniforms, procedures, and communication errors. Tora, Tora, Tora wasn't a box office smash in the US, but veterans continued to recommend it because it respected both history and those who endured it. It proved that sometimes the most powerful war stories come not from exaggeration, but from simply telling the truth. 12 O'Clock High 1949. Ask a veteran bomber crew which movie got it right, and many will name 12 O'Clock High. Starring Gregory Peck, It focused on the crushing strain of leading daylight bombing missions over Europe. Veterans admired how it stripped away glamour and zeroed in on exhaustion, leadership, and the cost of responsibility. Peck's character, Brigadier General Savage, takes over a demoralized group of airmen. At first, he's hard, demanding perfection. But slowly, the film reveals the toll. Even leaders can break under the relentless pace of missions. Veterans recognized that collapse. It wasn't weakness, it was reality. The film is remembered for its accuracy. Former bomber crews praised the way it captured both the technical aspects and the emotional burden of watching friends not return from missions. Instead of dramatizing one big moment, it painted a portrait of cumulative stress. Veterans said that was the part most films missed. Critics hailed it as one of the finest war dramas of its era, and the U.S. Air Force even used it as a leadership training tool. Veterans say that's the ultimate proof. When a movie is used to teach new officers about the mental strain of command, you know it captured something real. 12 O'Clock High wasn't flashy, but for veterans of the skies, it was painfully accurate. Patton 1970. When George C. Scott stormed onto the screen as General George S. Patton, veterans didn't just see an actor, they saw the general himself. His gruff voice, piercing eyes, and contradictions made this performance legendary. Some veterans called it the most accurate character study of a wartime leader ever filmed. The film doesn't shy away from Patton's flaws. His temper, his arrogance, and his obsession with glory are on full display. Veterans respected that. They knew real leaders weren't perfect. They were complicated, sometimes infuriating, but effective when it mattered. The opening speech in front of the massive American flag became iconic, but the real strength of the film is in the quiet moments. Scott showed Patton wrestling with doubt, envy, and the heavy burden of command. Veterans said those cracks made him human, not just a symbol. The film won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Actor. Yet its greatest achievement may be how it sparked renewed debate among veterans about leadership styles. Some loved Patton, others loathed him, but nearly all agreed the film nailed his complexity. For veterans, Patton wasn't about worship, it was about recognition. They saw in Scott's performance the difficult truth. Leaders can be brilliant and deeply flawed at the same time. Stalag 171953. Before Hogan's Heroes made POW life into comedy, there was Stalag 17, a sharp, cynical take on life inside a German prison camp. Veterans respected it for getting the tone right, a mix of boredom, humor, and constant suspicion. William Holden plays Sefton, a cynical prisoner accused of collaborating with the enemy. Veterans loved the grittiness of his portrayal. Sefton wasn't noble or inspiring, but he was believable. The real drama came not from escape attempts but from the paranoia of not knowing who to trust. Unlike many films of the era, Stalag 17 didn't paint its prisoners as saintly martyrs. They were flawed men, scheming, arguing, and sometimes betraying each other to survive. Veterans said that rang true. The film's balance of dark humor and tension mirrored their own memories of trying to stay sane under confinement. Directed by Billy Wilder, who fled Europe during the rise of fascism, the film carried personal weight. Veterans picked up on that authenticity. Stalag 17 won Holden an Oscar and earned lasting respect from former POWs who said it captured both the pettiness and the resilience of life behind barbed wire. It wasn't about big battles. It was about the quiet war fought day after day in the shadows. A Bridge Too Far 1977. Some films glorify bold plans. A Bridge Too Far showed what happens when bold turns into reckless. Richard Attenborough's massive production tackled Operation Market Garden, the ill-fated Allied attempt to seize bridges in the Netherlands. Veterans praised it for honesty. It showed how even brilliant armies could overreach. The film boasted one of the largest casts ever assembled: Sean Connery, Gene Hackman, Anthony Hopkins, Michael Caine, Robert Redford, but it never lost sight of the story. Veterans appreciated how it balanced the star power with the sobering reality of failure. What struck veterans most was the chaos. Paratroopers dropped into the wrong zones. Radios failed. Reinforcements never arrived. Plans collapsed hour by hour. For veterans who had lived through operations where everything went wrong, this rang painfully true. The production spared no detail, filming on actual locations with authentic equipment. Veterans said it felt less like a Hollywood drama and more like a reconstruction. A bridge too far wasn't the triumphant war film audiences expected, which hurt it at the box office. But for veterans, that honesty was its strength. It reminded them that not every mission ends in victory, and that's a truth worth remembering. So, there you have it. 20 war films that veterans themselves hold above the rest. Notice a pattern? It's not the flashy explosions or Hollywood glamour that earned their respect. It's the grit, the honesty, the messy reality of survival, leadership, and loss. Now it's your turn. Did your favorite make the cut, or did we miss one? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more dives into film history that matter.